Here are my tips and tricks on how to get the best data greetings in KH3. In Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind, Square introduced the data greeting feature, which allows you to pose characters from the game in one of several maps and take photos that you can keep in the game or share online. There's a decent amount of variation for something like this, and you can get a lot of fun shots. I guess Square finally stumbled upon DeviantArt and saw the MMDs and figured, we can do this better. I've taken over 1,000 data greetings in the past year for my own video series called How to Fix Kingdom Hearts, and I think I've managed to get some absolutely amazing shots. I have a pretty good grasp on how to get the absolute most out of your data greetings, so I'm going to share with you some of my tricks. I first want to say that if you can, I highly recommend using the PC version of KH3. The PC version not only has extra features built in that improve visual quality, but it also allows for mods which add infinite variety to the types of pictures you can take. Different characters, different maps, different outfits, different weapons, and the modding community is only improving as time goes on. For the remainder of this tutorial, I will be using the PC version of KH3, but some of the techniques will apply to all versions of KH3 Remind. I want to preface that I'm going to explain things as simply as possible. I'm not a professional photographer, so I may screw up some of the terminology. Please don't roast me. I'll first show off some basic photography principles to help frame your shots a little better. In short, always beware of your centering. See all these gray outlines on your camera view? While some people think these lines get in the way, they're actually quite useful. Obviously, this box in the center marks the center of your camera, but see these curved lines to the side? These kind of act like a rule of thirds. Instead of having everything centered, using the rule of thirds adds an extra layer of photographic oomph to your shots. Just aim one of the curved lines roughly centered on your subject, and boom, you got yourself a fancy portrait shot. When dealing with 2 or more characters, your centering is key to making the picture look nice. These lines on either side are typically what I use to keep all my characters contained in the center of focus. If 2 characters are facing each other, it's easy to align them in this box and get a perfectly centered shot. If you have multiple characters on screen, align the outmost characters to these lines, and it usually works out fine, depending on how they're posed. Also, take into consideration height. See these lines at the top and bottom? They sort of act like your ceiling and floor. When taking shots of characters, I don't recommend aiming characters beyond these lines because it can look out of frame. One mistake I see a lot of people make is they aim the camera too high, and most of the subject ends up falling below frame. Aim the camera slightly lower, bringing the top of your character up towards that ceiling line. This puts everything in frame just a little better. And of course, we have to be careful of how we're actually posing and placing the characters. Are they a good distance from each other? Are they aligned with each other? Are they looking at each other? What map are we using and what's in the background? When I create data greetings, I always keep these little things in mind. The more little things you're willing to pay attention to and tweak to get it just right, the better your final result will be. The number one tip I can give people for setting up the best data greetings is always tell a story. There should be a reason why characters are placed and why they're doing whatever they're doing. Don't just add things to add things. What is the story? What are the characters feeling? Is that behavior consistent with who they are as a person? What's the situation? What are their motivations? What's the context, etc.? Have all of those things in mind when planning and executing your data greetings, and things will fall into place a lot more naturally. People will look at your data greeting and maybe it won't be completely understood, but they'll get a certain feeling and see the emotion of the characters and get a general idea of the mood you're trying to convey. And that's huge. When making action shots, one principle I always keep in mind is visual density. Action is very energetic and chaotic, so when creating an action shot, you should be adding as much energy and chaos as possible. I'm talking particle effects, screen effects, decals, auras, attack effects, small enemies in the background, etc. But don't get it twisted, despite adding all these extra elements, your shot composition should always focus on the characters. So make sure you're paying close attention to the faces and poses your characters are making, and always try and really focus on those centering techniques because you don't want to miss the action. All the extra visual density may not be the focus, but subconsciously it makes a big difference. One posing technique I like to use to get a little variety is to play around with the physics. Characters' hair and clothes blow in the wind when selected, and deselecting will freeze that position in place. If I want to portray a character falling, running, dodging, or channeling energy or something, I'll raise up the character's position, drop it really fast, and try and freeze as their hair and clothes flare up. It can take a few tries, but the end result can look very, very nice. It also works well moving the characters side to side. I also want to cover lighting. Lighting is pretty straightforward using all the default maps, just be wary of the position of the sun sometimes. But see these little emissive lights? These are cool for adding a bit more visual flair to your shots. One easy example I can think of are glowing weapons like Axel's Keyblade or Xemnas' lightsabers. By default, they emit a little bit of light, but watch as I add extra lights. I think this enhances the look a little bit, adds more color, you know. For cases like this, I like to use the medium or small setting. Also, take a look at a shot like this. Really cute shot with the sunset and everything. I can add some particle effects and it looks pretty cool. One thing I want to add to give it a little extra spice is small blue lights, like it's refracting the water or something. Add them around the characters and boom, it looks kind of cool. If you want to get a sort of bloom effect, there's an easy way to do it. If you want a very mild bloom, simply add the light decal anywhere on the map. You can put it on the opposite side of the map and the bloom will still be in effect. If you want a bit of a stronger bloom, add the water decal. Far enough away from the decal, the rain will stop, but the bloom will remain. I find that this can also help mitigate some of the blocky aliasing you get, especially in the hair. We'll talk more about anti-aliasing once we get to the PC-only section. On console, there's not much you can do. If you want to take better before and after shots, instead of hoping you don't move up or down while adjusting your subject or trying to painstakingly realign your shots every time, use this easy trick. Place these boxes to form a sort of corner in front of your subject that will mark your desired camera position. Take the first shot, but don't close or move the camera. Walk towards the subject until you're right in front of it, and being careful not to move, close the camera, select the subject, change what you want to change, and deselect. Go back into your camera and nestle yourself back into that corner. You should be in the exact same position. This is the best method I've found for before and after, but if you know a better way, let me know in the comments. Also, one technique that's been around for a while is clipping characters closer together. There's a million tutorials for this already, but in short, put together these boxes like this, place your characters in the middle, and slightly adjust the space of the hole in the center depending on how close you want the characters to be. I find that this has its limitations, especially with larger characters like Terra or Xehanort. They don't clip very well. It's finicky, but useful for getting some cute shots. And if you ever want to get an alternate angle or just see things beyond the walls, there's the clip through walls technique, which also uses the boxes and looks something like this. So for the PC users, one mod I highly recommend getting your hands on is the Data Greeting Plus mod by Yuri Lude. It's free to download on the Nexus Mods website, and installation is super easy. The benefits of this mod include a higher cap on the number of characters and objects you can have on screen, but by far the biggest benefit of the Data Greeting Plus mod is it greatly improves your camera options, including a much larger zoom and greater depth of field. In short, a greater zoom not only allows you to zoom in on things far away, but allows you to hone in your shots on the characters better. This is a basic principle of photography and lenses in the real world, but it also applies to data greeting. All you have to do is step further back, zoom in more, and you'll watch as the character or object has a more portrait-y type look. This is very common in photography and cinematography, where lenses with higher focal lengths are used to frame characters in their shots. It makes it easier for our eyes to focus on the characters and less on the background, because as you can tell, it puts less of the background into the shot the higher the focal length. It also slightly affects the characters' faces, making them look flatter and squarer, which is usually a good thing, but sometimes it can look kind of funny depending on how extreme you go with it. Greater depth of field makes the background blurry, making it even easier for our eyes to focus on the characters, and it looks super cinematic and cool. Now, the way that depth of field works in data greeting is dependent on wherever you're pointing the camera. This becomes more sensitive the more you're zoomed in, and the higher your depth of field is set to. Point the camera at your character and the background gets blurry. But if your character is still in the shot and you point your camera at the background, the character gets blurry. This is great for things like over-the-shoulder shots where one character is in focus while the other isn't. But what if I want two characters in the shot, but I can't point the camera at them, such as a shot like this? How do I still get depth of field? One trick I've learned is to add an invisible block in the center. These blocks are great for lots of things because they're invisible once you turn on the camera, but if you put one in the center of where you're pointing your camera, you can add depth of field without having to place the camera on your characters. Pretty neat. I try not to get too crazy with the depth of field when taking shots of characters. It's okay to keep it cranked to the highest settings sometimes, but I find if the background is too blurred, it can look kind of unnatural and overdone. Play around with it to get that sweet spot. The Data Grading Plus mod also allows for greater height adjustment, though I find the height adjustment has its downsides, such as moving in too much when looking down. It's better when you just want to look at something straight ahead or above, but 9 times out of 10, I prefer to just stack a bunch of invisible cylinders on top of each other and use that to gain height. If I need to look down, I'll place a large flat box on top to be able to walk around a bit more. The mod also has a better tilt feature. You can tilt a whole 90 degrees if you want to frame something like an iPhone. Kind of niche, but I've gotten some cool results with it. I need to mention custom characters and custom maps. There are tons of amazing mods on the Nexus Mods website that will allow you to add new elements to data greeting. Most character mods, texture mods, or weapon mods should work in data greeting, and it really allows you to expand your options. Custom maps are a little less easy, but most map mods that replace the data fight arena will work, as well as a few other replacement mods. And one upcoming mod to look out for is an expanded data greeting mod by Jay Mill from the OpenKH Discord server. The project adds a ton of extra maps from the game to data greeting, as well as expands boundaries. An early build helped me out a ton on part 4 of my KH rewrite. It's just a really promising project, and I hope it gets released to the public in the near future. And for a very specific use case, there's enhancing lighting on custom maps. In short, the built-in lighting engine isn't perfect for every use case. There's something called an ENV, and each map in the game uses one to dial in the correct lighting. But it's pretty difficult to create a custom ENV for this game and still have it look perfect. Oftentimes, mod creators will use a pre-existing ENV from another map in the game, but that's not always perfect either. One thing I've done to help mitigate this is using these emissive lights, specifically the white and blue lights. If I think the lighting on a custom map that's kind of dark isn't looking right, I'll use a large blue light and simply back it up to the point where it's slightly lighting up the whole subject. The way that these lights reflect off the characters usually looks better than one with an incorrect ENV, but this isn't perfect either, but for close-up shots it can definitely work. And also check out what happens to this map once I fill it with those lights. Kind of enhances the look, don't it? Which now brings me to how to get the absolute highest quality data greetings in terms of resolution. And this is PC only as well, and can also depend on how new and powerful your graphics card is. So by default, data greeting will take the photo at your monitor's native resolution. For most people, that's 1080p or 1440p. But there's a technique called super sampling, which will render the game at a higher resolution and then downscale it to your screen. This will actually make your image look sharper and more detailed, and will help clean up that aliasing effect. One easy way to enable super sampling in KH3 is to open the game, go to Settings, open the Display settings, go to Resolution Scale, and turn it from 100 to something higher, 200 being the max. If you're running a 1080p monitor and set the scale to 200, you'll be rendering the game at 4K. And that means your data greeting will be at 4K as well. But that will obviously mean your frame rate goes down and the game will feel more choppy. For data greeting, this is less of an issue, but if you're thinking about playing the game this way, it could get quite annoying. You can take super sampling a step further and enable it on your graphics card as well. This is only a feature for newer graphics cards, usually released within the last 4 to 5 years, so be mindful it may not work with older cards. For NVIDIA cards, go to the NVIDIA control panel and on the left, click Manage 3D Settings, and under Global Settings, scroll down to DSR Factors and set the factors to your liking. This will render your desktop and applications to a higher resolution than native by default. For AMD cards, you open Radeon Software, click on Settings in the top right, go to the Display tab, and enable Virtual Super Resolution. This will only enable higher resolutions in the games themselves without affecting your desktop. You'll see once it's enabled, you can select higher resolutions in the display settings of Kingdom Hearts. Now watch, if I enable both a higher resolution with AMD Super Resolution and I enable 200 resolution scaling, I'm rendering the game at 8K. I went from rendering 2.7 million pixels to 44 million pixels, so the frame rate isn't great, but with enough patience, I can line up the shot and get something that looks incredible. I'll usually keep the large file as is, but if I want to go the extra mile, I can take the JPEG file of the photo I took, open it in a photo editing program, I use Paint.net, which is free, and I can resize the full image to something more reasonable like 1080p using the super sampling method to get a very sharp and clean looking data greeting. See the difference side by side. With all that said, hopefully this tutorial was helpful for people looking to up their data greeting game. I can't wait to see what kind of data greetings you guys will come up with. If you would like, you can tweet them at me at Kryptonic02 on Twitter. I would love to see them. And yeah, have a great day.